I want to talk about high blood pressure because my dad's been on high blood pressure medication for decades, and I just started learning more and more about it because I'm taking classes at the oldest herbal school in the United States. And the way they described it, it was just an eye opening for me. And
Mhm.
so I think when we look at modern medicine and how doctors approach it, they're really going off of something called the chemical imbalance theory and also germ theory, which is from Democritus. Democritus was a gentleman in ancient Greece, and he's the one who said that we are simple matter. We just need to be dealt with simply, meaning, all right, if we're not producing enough insulin, we give more
Mhm.
insulin to the body. We're lacking a hormone, add more thyroid hormone, for instance. What this method doesn't realize that when we add more things like that to the body makes less of it. So we need to really get to the bottom of the issue as opposed to treating it topically. Hippocrates, I think, even though he's credited as the founder of modern medicine, we don't really use his ideals in modern medicine today. Eh,
Mhm.
because he felt the body, when given the right conditions, could heal itself. So, where is that principle used? Not in conventional medicine, it's used in natural medicine. So, he's the first natural doctor. So, high blood pressure, if we segue into it, the reason it starts is because the body, for some reason, needs more pressure. Why is that happening? Well, the cells are not getting enough oxygen, they're not getting enough nutrients. And so they start screaming for more of it. So what does the brain do when they hear this request from the cells? They say, I'm going to tell my buddy, the heart, the circulatory system, to increase the pressure so that there's more blood being delivered to the cells, more nutrients getting to the cells. And then we start to feel kind of bad. So we go to the doctor and he says, or she says, oh, you have high blood pressure. Let me give you a beta blocker. And what
Mhm.
does the beta blocker do? It blocks the signal the brain is sending to the heart to raise the pressure. And then we say success. But then this is very toxic to the body. We're destroying the liver, the kidneys. And the reason that the cells were not getting enough oxygen and nutrients is because we had hardening of the arteries. Why did the arteries become hardened? Because there was excess buildup of plaque. Where did the plaque come from? From glycation, which is a process where sugar molecules stick to protein molecules and then it starts to form plaque. So it's from a poor diet. It all originated from the poor diet. We were eating too many things that metabolize as sugar. We were eating too much trans fat. Trans fat is really when we take oil and we heat it up, it turns into a trans fat. So when we cook French fries in the same oil for a week at McDonald's, for instance, that heating up of that oil, that unstable oil, is what creates trans fat. And then the starchy vegetable, the potato, and all these things that we're eating, they turn into plaque. And then the body goes, oh, too much plaque in the arteries. I need to go and support it. Let me send my LDL cholesterol, which is very flexible, to try to support the arteries. And then the LDL cholesterol goes to try to give more elasticity. And then the immune system is confused and saying, LDL, what are you doing here? You're parked illegally. This is not your spot. I'm going to write you a ticket. And they keep writing tickets, and then it oxidizes the LDL. And so when we look at people with heart disease, high blood pressure, we say, well, there's oxidized LDL cholesterol. Therefore, the cholesterol must have been the cause. It's almost like we see an accident on the side of the highway, and then we find an ambulance there, and it's burnt down. And we see this happen so many times that we decide in our minds these ambulances are going around causing
Mhm.
accidents and getting burnt down. But that's not really what's happened. What's happened is we had a poor diet, it caused plaquing. The body tried to fix the plaquing by sending LDL, and then the immune system got confused and attacked the LDL and made it even worse. So the ambulances got sent there, and then the ambulances got burnt up. So
Right.
how do we fix high blood pressure? Well, we have to clean up the arteries so that we don't
Mhm.
need more pressure. So how do we do that? We eat lots of good things. We stop eating the bad thing. Garlic, for instance, helps clean out the arteries. It helps dissolve the plaque. So you can eat a lot of garlic. It's very antibiotic, antimicrobial, antiviral. It's got antioxidant qualities. The allicin is really helpful. I could take organic garlic capsules, two at a time, 3 times a day. It's gonna help clean out
Wow.
my arteries. Or I love eating garlic, slices of garlic.
That's
I
amazing. What would you say to, because some people will say, well, I don't like the taste, I don't like the smell, I don't like just the way it is because it has a strong smell. What would you say to people who just say they can't take in garlic?
Maybe they could take ginger capsules, or maybe they could take cayenne pepper. I mean,
Okay.
maybe eat a lot of onions, The quercetin in the onions can be helpful. The cayenne pepper is also helpful. I think that if we take cassia cinnamon, which
Mm-hmm.
can help us lower blood sugar, I think also
Mm-hmm.
helpful. Why do I say cassia cinnamon? Because, well, cinnamon has a poison in it called coumarin, and cassia has a lot of coumarin, whereas the Ceylon cinnamon has very little coumarin. So Ceylon cinnamon is referred to as the true cinnamon because coumarin can harm the liver, so we don't want to have too much of it. But what we've also learned is that when you have too little of the coumarin, it doesn't really help lower the blood sugar. So the Ceylon cinnamon is more expensive, but actually the cassia cinnamon, the one they sprinkle on at the restaurants and the bakeries, that's really
Mm-hmm.
red, the bad kind of cinnamon, actually in a small dose is, I think, better for the body in
Oh,
lowering blood
wow.
sugar.
So the redder the cinnamon, the better.
In
Okay.
lowering blood sugar, as long as we don't take too much of it. So I
Too
use
much.
this one
Okay.
brand and it's organic and it says take 2 capsules a day. I will not take 2 capsules a day because I'm afraid it's going to harm the liver. So I'll take one after
Yeah.
dinner.
I think that's where I fall short because
Mm,
I don't look at brands.
mm,
Usually I look at the ingredient, and if it doesn't have anything I cannot pronounce and it just
mm,
has that one ingredient, I take
mm.
that.
Sure.
So, what is the difference? And usually it's because many a time for the audience watching, the question is, well, if we want to eat healthy, then it's going to be so expensive because a lot
Hmm.
of these organic items are so expensive. So,
Yes.
what would your recommendation be? Because on my journey, to be honest with you, I didn't do a lot of organic because
Mm,
I knew that doing organic and going for the expensive things would not be sustainable for me.
sure.
So I went in the direction where, even though I did not do a lot of organic, I would pick up the label and make sure that whatever ingredient that was in there, it was just that one item. So,
Sure.
how would you advise me and the audience who think in a similar fashion, especially when it comes to cost?
I know it's we can't always be buying things that says organic or biologique in French, and I like saying that by the way when I go to Whole Foods. I'm like, oh, c'est biologique. It just sounds better than organic. But anyways, it's expensive, and so as long as we buy things that are healthy and we wash it really well, I think we're still helping ourselves and trying to
Okay.
minimize the pesticides that are used in that particular produce and wash it really well with really clean water. I think that would be the thing that I do. But really, for high blood pressure, we take the cayenne pepper to increase circulation. We take the
Okay.
garlic to clean out the plaque in the arteries. We take hawthorn berry extract to
Okay.
strengthen the heart and lower blood pressure. And that's from Dr. Russell Blaylock, one of his books that gives prescriptions. Pretty much he implies every cardiologist is aware that hawthorn berry is very, very good at lowering blood pressure. But hawthorn berry is not a patentable pharmaceutical ingredient, it's just a natural thing. So
Yeah.
nobody tells us you need to take
Yeah, it's
hawthornberry.
fascinating you say that because my husband was the one who first bought Hawthorne Berry. And I was
Mm,
wondering, what is that? And
yeah.
I did some research into it and realized it has phenomenal benefits,
Yes.
especially when it comes to the heart.
Yeah. And then the
Wow.
other thing is rutin. And rutin is from asparagus. It's a bioflavonoid and it helps give elasticity to the veins and the arteries. It's also what they call a diuretic, so we empty our bladder better when we take rutin. One of the reasons we have high blood pressure is not only the cells are screaming for more nutrients and oxygen, sometimes the body's response to this mayhem is tell the kidneys to retain more fluid, more of the sodium gets retained, and then we swell up, and that creates a higher blood pressure environment. So sometimes the doctors they don't just give us a beta blocker, but they give us a prescription diuretic, so we pee more essentially. But these chemicals are not really helping the body because they're always trying to go after symptoms, address the symptom instead of trying to figure out how everything's interconnected, why things are working the way they are, why things are malfunctioning the way they are. And so that's, I think, is very important. Those things, the hawthorn, the cayenne pepper, the garlic, and the rutin, I think those are the most important. Now, I learned that we can't go off of a beta blocker. It's very, very dangerous to go off of a beta blocker. Why is that? Because we're blocking the signal from the brain to the heart. And then the brain gets the feedback from the heart, and the brain goes, the heart's not listening. I need to scream at the heart a little louder and louder and louder. So our body increases the signal to the heart in a very unnatural way. So if we've been taking a beta blocker for 40 years, imagine how strong that signal is that our brain is sending to the heart. We cut that out, that's going to cause potentially a stroke. So we don't want to stop taking beta blockers. I think we want to become healthy, exercise, eat the right things, and then when we go to the doctor, maybe they'll say, your blood pressure's been getting better. Maybe you need to take a little bit less, a little bit less, and gradually maybe they'll reduce the dosage. That's really the ideal scenario. I kind of explain it like this. If let's say we have a sound system where we want to listen to some music and we turn the music on, but we don't hear any sound because somebody pressed the mute button and we don't even realize the mute button is been activated. So we keep dialing up the volume louder and louder and louder. And then somebody goes, oh, it's on mute. And they unmute it. And then boom, the speakers can blow out. So it's kind of like that with the heart when the brain's sending these strong signals to the heart to raise the pressure and the heart doesn't seem to be listening and the brain keeps sending a stronger signal. We don't want to all of a sudden unmute by stopping the beta blocker. I think the side effects of the beta blocker are potentially a stroke. The other thing is actually high blood pressure because the signal is
Wow.
stronger than it was normally before. If so, we come off the beta blocker, the pressure goes up way too high. The other thing is now we have poor circulation. For men, they could cause erectile dysfunction. And then it also can cause depression. I don't know if it comes in that order. Maybe they get depressed because they have erectile dysfunction. So
Right. And I'm
the
pretty sure the side effects will come one way or the other, but it will depend on every individual, whichever one comes first.
Right. So
Wow.
it's really sad when people have high blood pressure. I had a friend who was trying to get into the military, but I guess because of his high blood pressure, that his options were limited, he couldn't really do that. And I was hoping that I could talk to him about it, but we never got to have a conversation. So I think he decided to do something different. God bless him. But I think high blood pressure is something we can fix rather easily, but it's perpetuated because of the way that the medical profession addresses the problem.
Right. So you mentioned something that I wanted to touch on. I think that for medical professionals, they are taught to treat the symptom,
Mhm,
not
yes.
really get to the root cause of the symptom. And to be honest, at the beginning of my journey, I used to get so mad at medical professionals. But later, as I grew and as I learned more, I learned to give them more grace
Mm,
because it's really not their fault that they don't focus on the underlying problem. They were
right.
just not taught. I'm not sure if it's part of their job description to
Mm,
even find out what the underlying problem is. And that's why the onus falls on us, the
mhm,
individuals, to find out. And there are other medical professionals who, like nutritionists and things like that, who can help you figure out what is going on there. But at the end of the day,
mm,
it's usually an individual situation where you need to find out what is going on with you
mm.
and do what works for you, whatever it is, to come out of it. That is, if you want to come out of it, right?
Right. Yep. So you reminded me something because I did look up several studies. I think there were two or three different studies of how much nutrition is taught in the medical schools in the
Mhm.
United States. The one study was done in the early 2000s. It was a survey sent out to every accredited medical school. I think about 85% responded. Some of them didn't bother responding. And of the 85% that responded, they either taught no nutrition or they taught a very little bit of nutrition. The average
Mhm.
amount of instruction given for the schools that did respond was 23 and a half hours of instruction. I don't know if that's credit hours, if
Wait,
it's.
23 and a half hours
Yeah.
throughout their entire program?
Yeah. And
Wow.
so there's Dr. David Brownstein in Michigan. He wrote several books, and really good one about iodine, why we need it, why we can't live without it. And I watched a video of his where he talked about how in medical school he was taught that we don't have scurvy anymore because of vitamin C, and that we no longer have goiter because of the iodized salt in the United States, a little tiny bit of iodine that they put in the white table salt that's been bleached and chemically treated. And so that's really kind of the extent of the nutrition that is taught in medical school, if anything at all. But I'm not here to say that the doctors are bad people. That's the thing I wanted to point out. I have a friend, we have conversations like this all the time, and he has a really, really nice sister-in-law who's a pediatrician. And then when we have conversations, he thinks I'm trying to imply that doctors are bad human beings, and I'm not doing that.
That's
Paradigm.
usually the perception, especially
Yeah.
when you go
Mm.
the natural route and you
Yeah.
are not for all of the
Mm.
medications. It's perceived that you're
Right.
against doctors and hospitals, but that's not it at all.
And he's like, I have people in my family who are in the medical profession. I'm like, so do I. And I don't think
Right.
these are bad people. I love all the doctors. Well, not all of them, but most of the people that we deal with, I really appreciate them as human beings. And I don't think they're evil. I don't think they're trying to make us feel bad or make us unhealthy. They're doing things because it's their passion. They want to help people get better. That's why they got into the profession. That's why they put themselves through medical school. And a lot of these people do practice natural medicine. A lot of them practice functional medicine, and they
Right.
do coach clients and patients on things that are non-pharmaceutical. So I want to make that clear. I don't think doctors are bad people at all. And the other conversation we often have is, do doctors make money on the prescriptions they give or not? I don't really know. I don't really care. It's not the point. The point isn't, do the doctors get paid to prescribe or not. My point is, they've been taught to prescribe. And
Yeah.
so what do the prescriptions actually do to the body? That's more important. I'm not here to say doctors are bad people. And then I think what we do need to talk about is the history of the medical establishment, how it
Mm,
transitioned in the early 1900s to become what it is today, because we are calling natural medicine as alternative medicine, but that's not
right.
actually true at all, because in the United States, for example, up to the early 1900s, the medical schools were a mix of ideologies, and they were very open and they were sharing things, and most of them used homeopathy and herbs. We used to call it eclectic doctors who use herbs to treat.
Mhm.
That was the medicine of choice.
Yeah.
However, what happened was very, very rich families in the US started making money off of the petroleum industry. And then somehow it was discovered you could take petroleum molecules and mimic herbs. And so the idea came about, you can actually make medicine with petroleum molecules. And mind you that until 1945, crude oil was sold as an elixir. We used to buy it and drink it
Mhm.
thinking it was medicine. And so how do we get the public to take medicine when it sounds so scary? We're going to take petroleum molecules and turn it into medicine. How do we get people to do
Right.
that? Well, I think a good way to do that is if every doctor told their patient this is good for you, wouldn't people be more willing to listen? So the solution was, bring all the different schools under one banner, one
Mhm.
unified association, the American Medical Association. And then there was a man that was hired to do an investigation of all the medical schools in the United States and figure out all the flaws. Well, not all the flaws, but how do we make things better, more scientific? And so it was decided that, okay, we're letting anybody in who can pay the tuition. That's not right. We need to make sure they have a little bit more prerequisites. They should at least have a high school diploma to be able to apply for medical school. The medical school needs to be well funded, have additional facilities, and they need to have scientific research backing the teachings that they're using. And so what resulted was the Flexner report, written by Abraham Flexner, that pointed out all the problems of medical schools. The next thing we know is that it forced the merger and closure of schools overnight. So only the ones that were very well funded could stay open. So the last homeopathic medical school closed down in 1925. There's actually a medical school in New York. The old name is the New York Homeopathic Medical School or something very similar to that. But that used to be one of their names before they merged to become what they are today. So we have since then shifted the focus from herbal medicine and homeopathic medicine to pharmaceutical medicine. And
Mm.
so, although the medical industry has made great achievements in trauma care, in surgery, reconstructive surgery, when somebody falls down and hurts themselves, you go to the emergency room. This is what it's really good for. But when it comes to treating high blood pressure or osteoporosis or diabetes, modern medicine is really based on pills, and the
Yeah.
pills aren't really helping us. And if
Oh, yeah.
mm,
At some point, I believe I had 8 or 9 different medications that I had accumulated. And one of the days during my journey, I picked them all up and I put it down. And I said, so they were expecting me to put all of that into my body. Now, not counting the side effects, not counting the chemicals and the toxins that would be introducing into my body. And I remember at the time I thought, this is so evil. Why couldn't they tell me that I can reverse this naturally if I tried? I get
Right.
it that not everybody wants to try, but
Right.
why couldn't I just be told, hey, if you want to try, this is another way out? Unless they don't know. Because
Hmm.
if you do know and you're giving me all this, when I have asked you several times, I'm willing to do anything naturally to
Yes.
reverse it. But then you tell me, oh, yeah, nothing can be done because it runs in your family. No,
Mm.
it's not a genetic disease, it's not inherited, it's
Right.
acquired.
Right. Right.
So it's just because my family was living a certain kind of lifestyle, I started living that lifestyle. So then I walked the same path they did. But if I choose to change my lifestyle and start eating healthy, manage my stress, manage what I put into my body, sleep well, I don't have to deal with this. So, my question at the time, I used to sit by myself and I would ask, why couldn't they just tell me there was a way out where you could reverse it naturally without all of this if you're willing to put in the work?
Sure. I think that if they knew, they would have told us. I think the
That's
issue
what
is
I was
that
thinking.
most of them don't know, and it's not their fault because they haven't been taught and they've been told these natural methods are pseudoscience. It's
Mm.
not scientifically proven, and so they rely on the clinical studies that are funded by big organizations that have an agenda. I mean, before when the tobacco industry used to do research on the benefits of smoking, I mean, people didn't really question that, right? But now we
The
can all
benefits
agree.
of smoking.
Yes, so doctors used to recommend cigarettes to people, and we
Wow.
lived through an era where the tobacco industry invested so much money on studies that would show positive data from the nicotine and the cigarette smoking. But there are so many carcinogens in the cigarette smoke. We don't want to go close to that. But I think I can tell what they may have been funding. I haven't seen these studies, but there is nicotinamide riboside, NR. It's a precursor to NAD, which is a very important element that helps the body. So they're probably focusing on certain things that were helpful
Mhm.
from certain components that were in the nicotine leaf, the
Mhm.
tobacco leaf, but I think they were taking it out of scope and trying to say it
Yeah.
was good because it's
And
profitable.
yeah, and I have a question I want to ask you about smoking, but I just want to go back a little bit. So, when you mentioned the precursor, I
Mm,
realized that insulin resistance is a
mhm.
precursor for a lot of diseases,
Yeah, I
right?
think so.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, you name it. And
Hmm.
then that's a precursor, but insulin resistance is not measured. There's no way to
Yeah.
measure.
So here's a way I look at it. So I read Effortless Healing by Dr. Joseph Mercola, and then I also read Young Forever by Dr. Mark Hyman, and they both seem to talk
Oh, I
very
love Mark Hyman.
yes. And so my understanding is that we have about a spoonful of blood sugar in our body and the glucose, because our cells need glucose as a form of energy to function. And then
Mhm.
when we eat, the blood sugar goes up. And so when the blood sugar goes up, we need to make sure the energy goes to the cells of the muscles. And if we're active, we're going to use it. And this is just a very healthy lifestyle. However, if the blood sugar gets too high, if it turns into 1 tablespoon, we actually die. So we have to take this glucose and send it to the cells. But to take it to the cells and unlock the door to the cells, we need a key. And the key is insulin. And so our friend the pancreas, one of its functions is to produce insulin so that it could take the glucose to the cells of the muscles and say, hey guys, here's your energy for the day. But what happens sometimes is we live a sedentary lifestyle and the insulin comes bearing gifts with the glucose and the muscle cells go, ah, this guy lives a sedentary lifestyle. He's just got to go home and watch TV on the sofa and eat potato chips. We don't need you, glucose. Go somewhere else. And so the insulin goes, ah, okay, I'll take it somewhere else. So they go and store it in the liver as glycogen stores or glycogen stores. It's like a closet where you put the stuff that you didn't sell that day. And then when that overflows, the fat overflows as visceral fat, and then we start to accumulate visible fat in the inactive parts of our body, like our waist, our thighs, and our stomach, our belly, and so forth. And later on, when we get so fat the fat cells start refusing the glucose, and the fat cells go, "Ah, we don't need you either, insulin, go somewhere else." And that's when we have diabetes, is
Mm.
that we can't take this blood sugar anywhere, and so we're getting way too much blood sugar in the body and no way to actually reduce it. And so if we go to the doctor, sometimes what they do is they give us more insulin.
Yeah.
So when we take more insulin and force the blood sugar levels down with more insulin, the pancreas goes, "Oh, I don't have to make as much insulin." And so it perpetuates the problem. And so if we think about it, when we eat something, our body takes 12 hours to process the extra glucose. The insulin needs to take the glucose, deliver it to the cells, or do what it needs to do. It takes 12 hours for our insulin levels to come back down to normal.
Hmm.
Now
Yeah.
we have 24 hours in a day. So let's say you and I only ate once every 12 hours. That would still mean that for our entire lives that our insulin levels would be way too high all the time.
Hmm.
And we actually tend to eat 3 meals a day without giving the body any time to take a break. And
Yeah.
so we always have too much blood sugar. We always have too much insulin in our body for the most part. And then what happens is we develop insulin resistance. We're
Yeah,
so
because the
used
blood
to the
sugar is so high, so consistently for a
Mhm.
long period of time.
Right. So the body is so used to blood sugar being high, the insulin being high. So when the insulin is produced by the pancreas, the body doesn't do anything. And then a couple things could happen. The pancreas could compensate and go, "I got to make more insulin." So it
Yeah.
makes more insulin, and then it gets tired and it gets worn out. And that's really when we have the difference between, I think, type 2 and type 1. Type 2 is when we have insulin resistance. Type 1 is when the body's immune system starts attacking the islet cells of the pancreas so that it stops making insulin. And
Mm.
so we need to externally inject the insulin because the body won't make it anymore, or his body is fighting itself from making it. It almost sounds like the body wants to commit suicide.
Wow.
And so, how do we prevent diabetes? I think we need to not eat all the time. Right? That's why intermittent fasting and fasting is so good, because if we do it correctly, we have electrolytes in the body, we have enough sodium, the potassium, all the bicarbonates to keep us functioning, and we're using ketones and burning the stored fat. We're using that for energy. Then we actually give the body a chance to lower the insulin levels. And I think it's day 4 of fasting where our insulin levels actually normalize,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
And
day 4.
mhm,
That's when your overall insulin level
mhm,
drops. Actually, after 72 hours,
mhm,
the overall insulin level drops. And that's why
mhm,
at the time when I started my journey, when I
mhm,
wasn't insulin sensitive yet,
mhm. Yeah.
I realized that on day 3, after 72 hours, between day 3
Mhm,
and day 4,
mhm.
because my overall insulin was dropping and it was dropping really fast, I would get
Yeah.
woozy. I would have heart palpitations. It was
Right.
an uncomfortable feeling at
Mhm,
the time. And so during my journey of reversing diabetes and losing over 100 pounds,
mhm.
I only did 3-day fasts, I believe twice
Yeah.
throughout the journey, because it can get very dangerous, especially when you're insulin resistant and you
Yeah.
try to do elongated fast. Now, the
Mhm,
intermittent fasting, 24, 48, you'll be fine. But
mhm,
anything after 72 hours can get pretty dangerous. So that's why I waited till I got insulin sensitive. Now
mhm,
I can go as long as, like I said, I'm on day
mhm,
8
mhm.
of a fast and I
Yes.
feel fantastic.
Yes.
All I've been drinking is water and
Right.
green tea, and it feels absolutely great.
Yeah, and I remember when I did those fasts that I felt wonderful at
Yeah.
certain points, but I do recall in the very beginning, if I went over 48 hours and went into 72 hours, this started to become difficult. I was probably
Yeah.
insulin resistant at the time, and
Wow.
if when we're forcibly bringing down the blood sugar, this is when we can kind of go into a shock. And so some people, if they don't have sugar, they go into a shock. And the way I understand it is because they've been administered insulin and we're putting excess insulin to bring the blood sugar down, the blood sugar comes down too quickly. And this is when that kind of diabetic person needs their sugar. I think that's why, because I thought, oh, insulin, it just means you have too much blood sugar. How could you need sugar? But that
Right.
kind of that kind of explains it because it's a
Right.
cycle.
It's
You mentioned 72 hours. One of the things I use is a chart. I think there's a chart online that shows the different stages of fasting. The autophagy starts from 18 to 24 hours. It starts peaking at 72 hours, and our immune system starts getting
yeah.
stronger and stronger from the 72-hour mark, which is why it's so good. So if a person has a chronic disease and they can safely fast at the 72-hour mark, they're getting so much benefits to the body, I think. And we haven't done 72 hours in several months. I want us to get back there. We've been cheating a little bit because wife is getting
It
good
happens,
results. Yeah.
especially when you're able to get results.
Yeah.
It happens.
She gained some weight back because she lost 30 pounds and she gained back 10. And
Yeah.
so, I mean,
No, I
it's.
think it's absolutely normal because
Mm-hmm,
once you've gone through a journey, because when I went through my journey the first time, I lost over 100 pounds.
mm-hmm,
But
yeah.
at some point, I felt like when the wind blew, I
Mm.
blew with the wind.
Yes.
So I kind of cut down on how aggressive I was with it because I was
Mm,
aggressive with it because I wanted to reverse all these chronic conditions so badly, especially the herniated discs in my spine, because I just couldn't function. I couldn't do daily activities, which was
mm-hmm,
overwhelming. And sometimes I felt like a burden
mm-hmm, yeah.
to my husband and to my family because they had to help me with everything. And even though they didn't complain, personally, I didn't like that feeling. Just being
Right.
dependent on someone is not a good feeling.
Right.
So I wanted to reverse this so badly. I was very
Mm,
aggressive. And so I
sure.
lost weight very fast because
Mm.
I did it very aggressively and I reversed it. I moved from an A1C of 9.4, 9.6,
Wow.
9.6 to an
Wow.
A1C of about 5.3,
My goodness, that's great. So,
which
I
was
mean, 5.7 to 6.2 is generally where they say we are
pretty diet.
pre-diabetic, and then when we
Mhm.
go above 6.2, they say we are diabetic. So you
Yeah.
were at above 9.
9. I
Yeah.
was a 9.6. And
Mm,
actually, some of my audience watching, there are some
mm,
of them who were at 10
Oh,
and
really?
above. So,
Wow. Wow.
yeah, it's amazing how little changes and sometimes drastic changes can
Sure.
make a whole lot of difference in our lives.
Mm,
And I was saying this to say that because I was so aggressive, I lost weight so quickly. I had brought
yeah.
my A1C down to 5.3. But
It's
after I
wonderful.
stopped being aggressive, and like I said, I kept being blown with the
Mm,
wind, I
yes.
needed to gain a little bit more weight. But what
Mm,
I noticed is that when I started gaining weight,
mm,
I kept going towards the upward trajectory to the point where I gained almost half of the weight that I had lost back.
yeah.
So that's when I was like, nope, I need to do something about this because it's very easy to go back to the old way, doing things the
Yes.
way you were doing. Because I stopped eating my greens. I started eating, oh, let me just get a taste of this. It's only a taste, it's not going to do anything so badly. And by the time you realize you're just in it and you
Mm,
keep going and going. So
yeah.
I gained weight, but then I quickly caught myself and then brought myself back in check. And
Sure.
so, even though I was intermittent fasting, I was not eating, and this is where nutrition, I feel like it plays a very vital role. During my journey of reversing diabetes and losing over 100 pounds, I never worked out aggressively once. All I did
Mm,
was walk. Because of
yes.
the herniated disc, so I couldn't even work out.
That's right. Yeah.
I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that without working
Mm,
out. Now, when I decided to relax on the healthy lifestyle and
mm,
started eating a cookie here, half a muffin, oh, it's only a quarter muffin, it's only this, it's only that, without the fiber that I used to clothe the carbs and the processed sugar that I was taking, I started gaining weight. And at the time,
mm,
I was working out so aggressively. But even though I was working out so aggressively because I was eating the wrong things, I was still gaining weight. And I gained
yeah.
almost half of it back, about 40% of it back. So
Sure.
I had to quickly correct myself and start moving back. And there was school, there was work, the
Mm,
kids. It was just a lot of stress. And this is where stress management comes in. Because sometimes
mm-hmm.
when you're stressed, you
Yeah.
tend to binge eat and just to console yourself. And sometimes it's unintentional.
Mm,
By the time you realize you're so off track, so far off. But the good
Yes.
thing is, even when you get far off,
Mm,
you can still correct yourself and get
yeah.
back to it. And that's why I encourage my audience never to give up, because you
Sure.
can always come back to the right thing. So she gaining some weight, it's okay as long as you keep doing what you're doing and the right things. Because with the weight, it will fluctuate over time based on
Right.
life
Yeah.
conditions. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Miriam, when you talk about reversing diabetes and the slip disc, my apologies that I don't look surprised because it actually doesn't surprise me because I believe it 100%. I know it works. So when you
Mhm.
say it, I'm just like, yep, that's right. It works. And I actually am guilty of my A1C going back up to a level because for a while it was 5.7. And how I knew something was wrong, because the doctor wouldn't tell me anything was wrong. I had
Oh
to
yeah.
Google it to see what it meant.
Mhm.
And the nurse said, "Oh, he told you to diet and exercise a little bit." I'm like, "Okay." So, and I didn't know what A1C was 5 years ago, so
Right.
I Googled it and I found out the ranges. And then I learned that there's no such thing as pre-diabetic and diabetic. You're either diabetic or you're not. And so you're either pregnant or you're not pregnant. You can't just be a
Exactly.
little bit pregnant. So, but I don't know why they have this differentiation of 5.7 to 6.2 is pre-diabetic and afterward is diabetic. But I brought it down to 5.1 on that journey with my wife initially. So I was very happy. And she came down
Wow.
to 4.7, which was great. But
Whoa.
lately, she's gone back to 5.3 and I went back to 6. So I've been redoing because we've been eating things that we shouldn't be eating. I had a little bit of noodles that I shouldn't be having, the
Yeah.
pasta that I shouldn't have been having. I
Hey,
went
that,
back
that
to
makes us know we're human, right?
right, and I had pizza a couple times this year. And 3 times this year I had pizza, so I'm guilty of it. And I
Yeah.
had sausage on that pizza too, so another can of worms. But some of the things I've been doing lately, drinking a lot of water, getting a lot of sleep, and then I'm using the cassia cinnamon after dinner to lower the blood sugar. I also take citrus bergamot at night after dinner to lower the blood sugar, and then I take berberine, 4 of those, because it's 500 milligrams per capsule. I take the
Oh, wow.
maximum of 2,000 per day. And berberine I learned about from watching a different doctor who talked about it a couple years
Mhm.
ago,
Mhm.
and it helps me, and I feel so much better, and I can feel more energy. My stomach is flattening again. So, and I also take a
That
lot of
is
herbal
interesting.
medicines.
That's interesting. I think berberine
Mm,
is something I haven't explored yet, but I've
yeah.
heard a lot of good things about it.
I mean, a lot of times people say it's similar to metformin. It's similar to metformin. Thing about metformin is there have been recalls
Mhm.
because of contamination. And I read an article that said that the doctors are now more inclined to use Ozempic because
Mhm.
Ozempic is actually much more costly for like the insurance reimbursements, things like that per month. Ozempic is very expensive compared to
Oh, yeah, I
yeah,
know
mhm,
because I was recommended Ozempic by one of the doctors that I was seeing
mm,
at the time, and it is expensive. It can cost you thousands of dollars. But
right.
the funny thing is, there was a research study, I don't remember which one it was, that I read that actually stated that when you introduce fiber, a
Mm,
lot of fiber, healthy
mm,
protein, and healthy fats into your diet, it actually causes your body to produce a hormone called GLP-1. And that
mm,
GLP-1 is the same hormone in Ozempic, which costs
mm,
thousands of dollars. And the
yeah.
thing, yes, and the
Mm,
thing is, with the GLP-1 in Ozempic, you haven't changed the root problem. You
mm.
haven't changed the underlying cause. The hormone in the Ozempic is tricking your brain to think your belly is full, to think that you're satiated,
I
right?
see.
So
Okay.
once it's tricking your brain to think that you've come to the point of satiety, you just stay away from food. But I remember at the time, one thing I asked myself is number one, how long can I keep buying this medication that's going to cost me thousands of dollars?
Yeah.
I don't know how I'm going to afford that long term. And number two, what are the side effects that they
Yes.
don't talk about?
Right.
And then number three, as it is tricking my brain, if I stop taking it and I haven't fixed the underlying problem,
Right.
am I not going to be in worse condition or position than I was? Because if I haven't fixed the underlying problem, everything is going to revert to what it was because I cannot afford to buy it anymore. So then
Right.
my brain is no longer tricked to think that, oh, I'm satiated. So then I have to eat the things I eat. And I haven't corrected my nutrition, I haven't corrected my lifestyle. So then I go
I see.
back to that.
Oh, I see.
And
We revert. Yes.
yeah, you revert your
Mhm.
reversal, basically.
Mhm.
So then, how does that benefit me? And one of the side effects of Ozempic, I believe, it breaks down your muscle
Mm.
mass. It breaks down to a certain degree your muscle mass. So then you put on more fat. Your muscle mass has depreciated
Mm.
and you can't afford it anymore. You haven't solved the underlying problem. So then you start gaining weight. And that's why most people, when they get off it, they gain more weight
Mm.
than they had before because now
Yeah.
you have a lot more room to gain more fat and you're in a worse position than you were when you
It
started.
sounds very similar to the beta blocker for high blood pressure. You're in a worse situation than you were because your brain is sending these higher signals to the heart to raise the pressure. So, wow. And then you mentioned the muscle loss. That's another thing I wanted to share too, because doctors have been prescribing a statin drug for anybody with the cholesterol, total cholesterol over 200.
Yeah.
They say, oh, you need to be on the statin. But one of the side effects of the statin drug is that it causes muscle loss, sarcopenia, and
Mm.
it actually raises something called LDLB, which is known to cause cardiovascular disease. So I will not take a statin drug. I don't care if my doctor says you should have a statin. I'm not going to do that to my body. The other thing that you mentioned, the GLP-1, almost sounds like the leptin hormone that makes us feel full. So I noticed the days where I get very little sleep, I wake up and maybe I didn't get a good night's rest. I slept like 4.5, 5 hours. That day, I'm eating bad things. That night for dinner,
Mhm.
I'm craving the French fries that I never eat. And I want it that particular night. So it's kind of perpetuating the problem by not taking care of ourselves.
That is amazing. I
Mm,
had one final question I wanted to ask,
mm,
which is
mm,
a little off topic, but
mm,
it was something you were talking about
mm,
before I came in with
mm,
the other topic. You mentioned that you used to smoke.
yes, a lot.
So, what encouraged you to stop? And how did you go about stopping?
Just,
Because I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle
mm,
with.
sure.
Just quitting is not an option to some
Mm,
people. How did you
right.
go about it?
So it was taking over my life because I was getting so addicted. I had to smoke all the time, and I had to smoke a pack a day. And I don't know, some people say that's not so bad. They smoke twice that or 3 packs a day. But to me, it was getting so bad. I smelled like cigarette smoke all the time. Before going to bed, I'd have to go out and have 3 cigarettes before I could go to sleep. When I wake up, I need to have a cigarette. So walking to the bus, I need to have a cigarette. Getting off the bus, I need to have a cigarette. It was just becoming so time consuming. And part of it was me trying the patch. One time I got this job where I was working on like the 10th floor, and it would have been really inconvenient for me to come downstairs to smoke. And I wanted to really outperform in that role, so I didn't want to have to smoke cigarettes. So I got the nicotine patch and I put it on my arm. But my body was never used to that much nicotine, so I would get dizzy, and I wouldn't smoke during the day. And then I would come off the work hours. I would go home. On my way home, I would start smoking. And so
Mhm.
my body got so much nicotine because the patch was still there. I didn't take it off till I got home, and that I got more addicted. And then I started smoking a brand that didn't use burn accelerators, and it would last longer. That it had more nicotine, so it was just too much. And this is when I was single, and I had this vision in my mind that I'm gonna get married, and the person's not gonna want to kiss me if I smoke too much because I'm gonna taste like ashtray. So that was my motivation. I said, next year I'm getting married, so this year I'm gonna quit smoking and I'm gonna fix all my dental problems with all the tar that was built up. I didn't go to the dentist from when I was 15 years old because I was scared, I was traumatized, but I had all this tar buildup on the inside. So I had to fix a lot of things. That was my motivation. How did I quit smoking? Very interesting. I was looking at anti-smoking drugs, like smoking cessation drugs, and I looked at the side effects, and one of it said suicide. And I said, no, thank you. Let me try something different. So I used my trusty friend Google and I typed natural stop smoking remedies, and I found this herbal remedy that they were selling, and I looked into it. It had like lobelia, it had all kinds of herbs in it, which I didn't even know what they were. And it said side effects: you could have diarrhea in day 1 or 2. If you have diarrhea, please slow down and don't take as much. Like take a break for a day and then resume slowly. And so I figured suicide or diarrhea. Suicide, diarrhea. Okay, I'll try the diarrhea. And so I took the herbal remedy. It also came with the spray, which was also herbal. They said you will have cravings during the day. Even if you take these little capsules, you might want to spray this in your mouth so that you alleviate yourself. And then I found something called Lobelia pellets, homeopathic pellets on Amazon, and it said it also helps. So I was taking those. So those three things. And then just in case, I bought cocoa cigarettes, cocoa sticks. They use it on movie sets for actors who don't want to smoke, but they have to film a scene with the cigarette. So it
Oh,
was made of cocoa stick, and it looks like a cigarette. And I remember the first day I did go outside and have one of those, but it was so bad that I never wanted to do it again. It was just so awful.
wow.
And I managed to not smoke. And then I read an article that said when you are addicted to the nicotine, we have extra tens of millions or billions of nicotine receptors in the brain. And they had two screenshots of the brain scans, a normal person and a nicotine addicted person. And they were saying if you don't smoke, you don't intake nicotine for 6 months, these receptors they actually level off and you become like a normal person where you don't need the
Um,
nicotine just to feel normal again. And so my goal was can I go 6 months without any nicotine going in my body? And they also said 72 hours is what it takes for the nicotine to leave the body. So the first 72 hours are the most difficult. When I got through the 72 hours, I got motivated and I
mhm.
just kept at it, kept at it, kept at it. And 6 months went by. I still felt like having a cigarette from time to time.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not the promised land. I still feel like having a cigarette from time to time. But whenever I had a urge to smoke a cigarette, I would just drink something or eat something, and it would make me feel satisfied. And
Oh,
as time went on, I guess those receptors they leveled off. So now I never crave a cigarette. That's how I quit smoking. Oddly enough, I tried looking up that company with the herbal remedy, and they're, I think, under like federal investigation because the testimonial videos they used were actors. Some of these people didn't actually quit smoking, and so that's why they're being sued by the government because they use paid actors. And I'm like, really? You're gonna shut down a herbal supplier that's helping so many people quit smoking just because when they made commercials that they paid actors and the actors actually do smoke cigarettes? I'm like, I get it. There's a little bit of ethics issue, but if it
yeah.
works, why would you stop them from selling something that works? So that was just something I wanted to share.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I
Mm,
do hope that helps somebody
mm,
out there
mm,
because I don't know much about smoking, but it looks
mm,
like it's pretty much like sugar addiction. During the journey, it's like, man, it wouldn't hurt if I get a muffin or a
mm,
cookie, you know.
yeah.
So, final one, do you have anything
Mm.
to say to our audience? Anyone who is struggling with high blood pressure and any type of addiction for that matter?
I want to share that I was able to deal with one of the strongest addictions a human body could go through, which is a nicotine addiction. So maybe it's not something that sounds very serious, but physiologically is one of the greatest addictions that we can actually break free from. So if I could do it just taking herbs, I think people can do amazing things. I would say be hopeful, be positive, and believe in yourself.
Always be hopeful and always be positive. That
Mhm.
always goes a long way in everything that you do. Well, thank you so much, Juan. Really appreciate you being here. I've learned a ton, so much. As always, I can't wait to see you in the next one.
Likewise, thank you so much, Miriam.